Hello, everybody, and welcome to our pre-event for Celebrating Resilience, our event in the fall. I'll just say a little bit about the main event, and then I will introduce our guest speaker for this evening. In October 26th, River's Edge is bringing in Tareq Hadhad to St. Albert. Tareq, as you may know, you might be familiar with the book or the movie or just hearing about him on media over the past few years. He is the founder and CEO of Peace by Chocolate. I actually have some of the chocolate here now that I think about it. Oh, where is it? Here. There we go. One of their chocolate bars. There was more of them, but I've been eating them. My kids have been stealing them from me. They're delicious. And actually, I will also share my screen with you so you can see the event poster as well. Tareq is a Syrian refugee, and he and his family had a very successful business called Peace Chocolate Factory. It was called something else in Syria, and then they came to Canada and have rebuilt their business and have become very they're very connected to the mental health community and very supportive of all kinds of things through the sales of their chocolate. You may have seen them on the news recently because when President Biden came to Canada, the gift to him from Canada was one of the chocolate bars. We've just been seeing him a lot in the news lately. I heard him on an interview actually on CBC not too long ago too here on my way to work. So hopefully people are becoming familiar with his story. He tells just an inspiring story of his family's journey here, the way that they have rebuilt their life and become integral to their community. And it's also a wonderful story about entrepreneurship as well. In the event, he is also going to sign his book afterwards. And also very excited for the event that an Indigenous classical musician you may have heard of from here in Alberta, Jessica McMann, is also going to be sharing some music with other musicians for us. So it's going to be a wonderful evening. You'll have an opportunity to buy chocolates, have the book signed if you have the book, and hear just a really inspiring story. Of course, all of it is in support of our food bank here in St. Albert, which unfortunately is in really desperate need for support at this time. So we're hoping people will enjoy an inspiring story, a chance to reflect on their own resilience and maybe learn something about how we can build resilience in our own lives and also support something really important in our community. And so this evening, we are going to talk about resilience and talk about it in the context of this story of the Hadhad family. And our presenter tonight is Sabrina Roach. And Sabrina began working in human services as a care worker for homeless women. And after graduating with her bachelor's, she helped to support troubled children and youth in various group homes around Edmonton. For the past 12 years, she's provided emergency care for individuals and families as an advanced care paramedic. Her service industry background has helped motivate her to complete her Master of Counseling through Athabasca University. And she has just finished that degree very recently here. So congratulations, Sabrina. And she is connected to River's Edge because she's been a practicum student with us since September. And she has been providing counseling services to adolescents and adults. And in her work with clients, Sabrina facilitates a caring and supportive dialogue to help clients begin their unique path toward change. Empathy, compassion, respect, and confidentiality are essential for her as parts of this journey, and as she strives to meet clients where they are now and acknowledge what they need to help them move forward. So thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I did promise we would have a raffle at the end, and I will Be good to that promise, and a couple of you will win a couple of tickets to the event in October. And I also have a nice code for you to get some discounted tickets if you'd like as well. And along the way here, and for the next hour, we're going to learn more about resilience from Sabrina. So if you have any comments or questions, you'd like to link what you're hearing to the story, if you've had a chance to read it or watch the movie, or just aware of it, or link it to something in your own life, you're welcome to use the chat function, and we'll keep our eye on that. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll also stop the recording, see if you have some more questions or comments, and do our little raffle. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you for the intro, as well as a little dive into what the event is going to look like in October. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm going to just share my screen and we can get started with the presentation. Okay. Wonderful. Hopefully everyone can see that. So our presentation today is about celebrating resilience. Okay, so for today, we're going to be talking about what resilience is. And if anyone has any comments or concerns, questions, anything at all, please put it in the chat, and Nicole will be kind of reviewing that for me and helping me out. We can answer some questions along the way. We'll go over the Piece by Chocolate story, a bit of a synopsis if you haven't watched the movie, or if you haven't watched the movie, or if you haven't read the book, then we'll just kind of go through it, and you can learn more about it in October. There are 7 C's of resilience. We'll go over that as well today, and just different types of resilience that I found online, as well as just a short 8-minute video about 3 types or 3 ways that you can increase your resilience. Okay. So what is resilience? I mean, we've all heard it before. What does it mean to you? What resonates with you when you hear the word resilience? So it refers to both the process and the outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. So later on, we'll talk about the Hadhad family and how they were successful in adapting to Canada, to Canadian culture after war kind of took out their lives back in Syria. They had to rebuild here in Canada, and how they were able to adapt to that situation. Resilience also requires mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility, and the ability to adjust to internal and external demands. So that's a lot of big words, and I want you to just sit with that for a moment and think, okay, I guess resilience really is a multifaceted thing, mental, emotional, behavioral flexibility. What does that even mean? Resilience requires skills that develop over time. It's not something you're born with. It's really something that you work hard at building, and it takes time, determination, and help from others around you. And as we'll talk about later on in the presentation, the Hadhad family sticking together and being cohesive is really something that helps their resilience as they come to Canada. Again, flexibility, adaptability, and perseverance can help people tap into the resilience by changing certain thoughts and behaviors, and really changing the outlook and saying, okay, how am I going to look at this situation, and how am I going to make it better? How am I going to make this work for me and move forward? Resilience is what gives people the emotional strength to cope with trauma, adversity, and hardship. Resilient people utilize their resources, strengths, and skills to overcome challenges and work through setbacks. So, you know, I think in the video at the end, the speaker, she says that, adversity is everywhere. It doesn't discriminate. So whether you've had something traumatic happen when you were a child, or you've had some setbacks as an adult or as a senior, these things, they stick with you. And it's how you get through them and move on to the next phase of your life. And that's how you build resilience. So, as Nicole had spoken about, the Haddad family and their chocolate factory and coming to Canada and how we're celebrating their resilience story, it can hopefully inspire you to think, okay, like how can I be more resilient in my life? Or how can I help my children or my teens be more resilient as they go through this, through society or through their lives? So, a little synopsis for you if you haven't heard or haven't read the book, or seen the movie. I believe the movie is actually on Apple TV. You can watch it there. I think it's $5 to rent. So it's a really great story. And if you haven't seen it already, hopefully this will inspire you to take a watch. So the Haddad family, the story is kind of told by Tareq, who's the son of the developer of Peace by Chocolate. So his father was the man that kind of came up with the chocolate making in Syria. So the story describes a journey from Syria to Canada with heartbreaking stops along the way. From sunny days in Syria to the beginning of conflict and civil war, describes, how beautiful it was and how beautiful it was meeting each other, Tarek's mother and father, and then building a life together, making chocolate. And then the war breaks out, and Tareq shares the fear and confusion that came when the violence and danger began surrounding his family in Syria. The story shares the tribulations of spending days hiding in a basement and praying for safety. And horribly, the chocolate factory was destroyed by a bomb. The Haddad family made the difficult decision to leave Syria in search of safety, only to find more uncertainty and desperation as refugees in Lebanon. It was such a terrible time, but they still were able to kind of overcome that adversity. And really, it's just such a wonderful story. So Tareq is passionate about peace and entrepreneurship. The family relaunched the family business in Nova Scotia and to recreate chocolates that they once exported from across the Middle East. So it is an award-winning film. It's called Peace by Chocolate. And the name Peace by Chocolate is sort of an homage to coming to a new country and wanting peace, wanting to rebuild in a peaceful way, and by offering this beautiful gift of delicious chocolate. It's truly inspiring. And to hear Tareq share his story will leave you feeling really good and hoping to develop more resilience in your own life. So, as I was reading and researching resilience, and I found these 7 C's, and I thought they were really, really cool. And I wanted to share them with you today during our discussion on resilience. So, a physician, Dr. Ginsberg, who specializes in adolescent medicine in Philadelphia, who's also the co-founder of the Parent and Teen Communication Center, developed the 7 C's model of resilience to help kids and teens build the skill to be happier and more resilient. So if you've got kids or teens or wanting to develop your own resilience, this is a really great way to kind of start and look at that journey. So the first one is competence. And so this is the ability to know how to handle situations effectively. To build confidence, individuals develop a set of skills to help them trust their judgments and make responsible choices. So if we just sit back and think of that word competence, what does that mean for you in your line of work, your role as a parent, your role as an employee, as just a human to be competent. What does that mean? The second C is confidence, which it's kind of tricky, especially as a young child or as a teenager. That's when they're building their identity and really kind of finding their way through confidence. So let's look at that a little bit further here. So self confidence is rooted in competence. So relates to the first C. Individuals gain confidence by demonstrating competence in real life situations. So being able to look at a situation or a dilemma and being able to kind of think your way through it and problem solve will help build experience and confidence to tackle that in the future. If you come across an obstacle in your life and if you've already been through something similar, you feel a little bit more confident the second time around. So that is the second C of building resilience. The third C is connection. And connection is so important. When I think about connection, I think about my loved ones and my family and my children. And, Dr. Ginsburg explains connection is close ties to family, friends, and community and provides a sense of security and belonging. And if we think about the Hadad family, having close ties to family and friends, really losing a lot of that sense of community in Syria when the war broke out, they must have felt so lost, but they still had that connection to each other. And that kind of relates next to the fourth C, which is character. Dr. Ginsburg explains character as individuals need a fundamental sense of right and wrong to make responsible choices, contribute to society, and experience self-worth. And so these are really important to the building of character and really knowing yourself and being confident and competent in making your decisions on what's best for you, what's best for your family, and what's best for society and the community. Contribution, number 5. Having a sense of purpose is a really powerful motivator. Contributing to the community reinforces relationships. And I love this because with the story of Peace by Chocolate and having Tareq bring his family to Canada, and instead of just coming here and trying to survive, they brought chocolate and really tried to make a contribution to our community. And that helped with building resilience and feeling that connection and building character in the Hadad family. And that's why it was such an inspiring story. And that's why we're still hearing about interviews that they're doing. And I think that's why Nicole is having him come and talk about resilience in October. Number 6, coping. When people learn to cope with stress effectively, they're more prepared to handle adversity. Okay, let's sit with that one for a second. I think with regards to mental health, one of the major things that people come to counseling for is helping in finding skills to help cope with stressors. I think this is a huge one, actually. If you're able to find effective ways to cope, then it definitely makes sense that you'd be able to have more resilience. And if you found effective ways to cope, you're able to tell your children, your teens, or even other family members, your parents even, hey, this worked for me. It might work for you too. Finally, control. So Dr. Ginsburg talks about control is developing internal control, helps people act as problem solvers instead of victims of circumstance. So if we relate this to the Hadad family and the story of coming to Canada after suffering and losing everything in Syria and then Lebanon and being refugees, what if they were victims of circumstance? Would we have this wonderful chocolate? Would they be such an inspiring story? They were able to take control of their situation, work together, have the confidence to move forward and cope with the situation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If any of these resonate with you, if any of these surprise you, any of these 7 C's. Next, we're just going to talk about the types of resilience. There are 4 types, and I'll get into them in the next slide. But there's psychological resilience, emotional, physical, and community. I wonder if anyone knew there were so many types. I sure didn't. I thought it was interesting when I found this excerpt on the types of resilience, and we'll just kind of go through them really quickly here. So, psychological. I mean, this one seems pretty self explanatory, but it's the ability to mentally cope with or adapt to uncertainty, challenges, and adversity. Like I had mentioned before, adversity doesn't discriminate. Everyone's going to go through challenges. And it's the ability to cope with and adapt to these challenges is how you build that psychological resiliency. And I think it's something you build throughout your life, continuously. The second type is emotional. Emotionally resilient people understand what they're feeling and why. They're proactive in using both internal and external resources. Okay. Well, what would be an internal resource? Let's take a moment and think about, what is the difference between internal and external resources? Do I have both? Do I need to work on some? There are so many things in your life that can be used as, say, an internal and external. For example, external resources being your family, your community, education, and an internal resource, experience, connection to others. There's so many things. So if you have a moment, just take a moment to kind of think about what are some of your internal and external resources and how they can help you become a more emotionally resilient person. Next is physical. Physical resilience refers to the body's ability to adapt to challenges, maintain stamina, strength, and recover quickly and efficiently. One of these comes to mind, and I mean, there can be so many different types of physical challenges that we go through. I think of, an athlete, for example, would be very physically resilient, or maybe a soldier, or a woman, a person who's pregnant, and the ability to kind of have a child and then come back afterwards is really, your body goes through so many changes, and then being able to recover, that's a type of physical resiliency. And this one was really surprising to me because I had no idea that this was a type. And so I thought that was pretty inspiring to read about that. And lastly, community. So community resiliency. Community resilience refers to the ability of groups of people to respond to and recover from adverse situations, such as natural disasters, acts of violence, and economic hardship. So this one, definitely thinking about the Hadhad family, and, if there are other Syrian refugees coming to Canada and having that sense of community, or even just the pandemic and how the community recovers from that. There are lots of different types of community resiliency. All right. So I don't know if there's any questions, but I think it would be okay to start the video. Just give me a second here. And hopefully everyone can hear this.
In the face of such an enormous mountain to climb. Now, I have to confess at this point, I didn't really know that any of this was going to work. Parental bereavement is widely acknowledged as the hardest of losses to bear. But I can tell you now, 5 years on, what I already knew from the research, that you can rise up from adversity, that there are strategies that work, that it is utterly possible to make yourself think and act in certain ways that help you navigate tough times. There is a monumental body of research on how to do this stuff. Today, I'm just going to share with you 3 strategies. These are my go-to strategies that I relied upon and saved me in my darkest days. They're 3 strategies that underpin all of my work, and they're pretty readily available to us all. Anyone can learn them. You can learn them right here today. So number 1, resilient people get that shit happens. They know that suffering is part of life. This doesn't mean they actually welcome it in. They're not actually delusional. Just that when the tough times come, they seem to know that suffering is part of every human existence. And knowing this stops you from feeling discriminated against when the tough times come. Never once did I find myself thinking, why me? In fact, I remember thinking, why not me? Terrible things happen to you just like they do everybody else. That's your life now, time to sink or swim. The real tragedy is that not enough of us seem to know this any longer. We seem to live in an age where we're entitled to a perfect life, where shiny, happy photos on Instagram are the norm, when actually, as you all demonstrated at the start of my talk, the very opposite is true. Number 2, resilient people are really good at choosing carefully where they select their attention. They have a habit of realistically appraising situations and typically managing to focus on the things that they can change and somehow accept the things that they can't. This is a vital, learnable skill for resilience. As humans, we are really good at noticing threats and weaknesses. We are hardwired for that negative. We're really, really good at noticing them. Negative emotions stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive emotions and experiences seem to bounce off like Teflon. Being wired in this way is actually really good for us and served us well from an evolutionary perspective. So imagine for a moment I'm a cave woman and I'm coming out of my cave in the morning, and there's a saber-toothed tiger on one side and a beautiful rainbow on the other. It kind of pays for my survival for me to notice this tiger. The problem is we now live in an era where we are constantly bombarded by threats all day long. And our poor brains treat every single one of those threats as though they were a tiger. Our threat focus, our stress response is permanently dialed up. Resilient people don't diminish the negative, but they also have worked out a way of tuning into the good. One day, when doubts were threatening to overwhelm me, I distinctly remember thinking, no, you do not get to get swallowed up by this. You have to survive. You've got so much to live for. Choose life, not death. Don't lose what you have for what you have lost. In psychology, we call this benefit finding. In my brave new world, it involved trying to find things to be grateful for. At least our wee girl hadn't died of some terrible, long, drawn-out illness. She died suddenly, instantly, sparing us and her that pain. We had a huge amount of social support from family and friends to help us through. And most of all, we still had 2 beautiful boys to live for who needed us now and deserved to have as normal a life as we could possibly give them. Being able to switch the focus of your attention to also include the good has been shown by science to be a really powerful strategy. So in 2005, Marty Seligman and colleagues conducted an experiment, and they asked people, all they asked people to do was think of 3 good things that had happened to them each day. What they found over the 6-month course of this study was that those people showed higher levels of gratitude, higher levels of happiness, and less depression over the course of the 6-month study. When you're going through grief, you might need a reminder, or you might need permission to feel grateful. In our kitchen, we've got a bright pink neon poster that reminds us to accept the good. In the American Army, they framed it a little bit differently. They talked to the army about hunting the good stuff. Find the language that works for you, but whatever you do, make an intentional, deliberate, ongoing effort to tune into what's good in your world. Number 3, resilient people ask themselves, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? This is a question that's used a lot in good therapy. And boy, is it powerful. This was my go-to question in the days after the girls died. I would ask it again and again. Should I go to the trial and see the driver? Would that help me or would it harm me? Well, that was a no-brainer for me. I chose to stay away. But Trevor, my husband, decided to meet with the driver at a later time. Late at night, I'd find myself sometimes poring over old photos of Abby, getting more and more upset. I'd ask myself, really? Is this helping you or is it harming you? Put away the photos, go to bed for the night, be kind to yourself. This question can be applied to so many different contexts. Is the way I'm thinking and acting helping or harming you in your bid to get that promotion, to pass that exam, to recover from a heart attack? So many different ways. I write a lot about resilience, and over the years, this one strategy has prompted more positive feedback than any other. I get scores of letters and emails and things from all over the place of people saying what a huge impact it's had on their lives. Whether it is forgiving family, ancient transgressions, arguments from Christmases past, or whether it is just trawling through social media, whether it is asking yourself whether you really need that extra glass of wine, asking yourself whether what you're doing, the way you're thinking, the way you're acting is helping or harming you, puts you back in the driver's seat. It gives you some control over your decision making. 3.
Okay. Perfect. I hope it went well. I didn't cut in and out at all, and hopefully the video showed okay.
What a powerful video. I've never seen that one before. That was really moving. And thanks for your presentation. That was really nice overview of resilience. And I'm going to just turn off the recording so that we can maybe have a bit of discussion if we want to. So if you have any questions or comments, I'll be ready with them and we'll do our little draw too.
Yes.